The zombie apocalypse, while maybe inevitable, is kind of strong, but it seems extremely likely from a logical perspective. As we know, civilization is a house of cards, especially big civilizations. The bigger and bigger they get, the more of a house of cards it is. All it takes is one little aspect, one point in the supply line to break down, and the whole thing crumbles. It relies more and more on everything working smoothly, everything going to plan. Got all the science, got all the angles covered. But what happens when something goes wrong? Something goes really wrong and they can't fix it overnight. They can't fix it in 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months. And people start starving. This seems likely to happen somewhere down the line. And the question you have to ask yourself is, if you're starving, if people are starving, if lots of people are starving, remember there's no food. Once the grocery store, you've seen how people act in the pandemic with COVID. They went nuts and bought all the toilet paper. Imagine if something really big happened and people just went crazy. The stores would be empty in a week. The stores would be empty in a week, and people would be starving within a couple weeks. Because some people live check to check, and their cupboards are empty. They expect to eat fast food. I have a friend like this. You know who you are. And they don't know how to cook. They don't know how to provide for themselves. So yeah, people will start starving very quickly once the supply lines break down and once money stops meaning anything. So you got to ask yourself, once people start starving, what are they going to eat? What's if you want to hunt game, what's the most plentiful game that's easy to catch and has a lot of meat? Ask yourself this. What's easier to catch and eat? A squirrel that might feed you for one day, or a big fat human that could probably feed your tribe for a week? What are people going to eat when there's nothing in the stores? Are they going to suddenly turn into hunter gatherers and learn how to trap mice? And there's not enough land. First of all, there's not enough land for everyone to do that, even if they wanted to. And they could, which obviously they can't. Most people, that's the thing with civilization. It makes you depend on it, it makes you weak. I wouldn't last long in nature. I'd probably last longer than most people, but still, that wouldn't be very long. I mean, it's a house of cards, and it's always waiting to collapse. And that's the thing that keeps people in fear because they know that. They subconsciously know that. That's why they follow the rules and participate and turn their blind eye to all these atrocities because they're scared. They're scared for themselves and their families because they know they depend on the same people who start all these wars and cause all this misery to feed them. And if they decide to feed you poison food, what can you really do? You depend on them. Sure, you can grow your own food if you have land and you're even bothered to grow food. But how much land do you actually need to support a person? Well, the answer to that is how many people were here before the European ships arrived. That's how many people that the land can support. So, one way or another, whether people starve or they cannibalize each other, they're going to go. So, why not, wine and dine on some wide behind? See, you don't, it's not necessarily a good thing to be a survivor. Sometimes it's just better to just die in the big blast and don't have to see what comes after. But yeah, the zombie apocalypse is inevitable. The flesh eating zombies, yeah, they're going to eat flesh because they're starving and there's nothing else. What's easiest to catch? What's the most plentiful? Overpopulated. What happens in nature when a species gets overpopulated? The deer get overpopulated. Suddenly, a whole brand new crop of bobcats appears. Nature creates a balance, and it seems that more and more that we're deliberately violating that balance. And when you deliberately violate the balance, all kinds of catastrophes are always waiting to happen. You're inviting catastrophe. We are inviting catastrophe. If it's not the zombie apocalypse, it'll be something else. The zombie apocalypse wouldn't really end civilization. It would just be really, really messed up. The thing that ends civilization is going to be even bigger than that. But we don't know what or when or why or how. We just know that it will happen at some point. It's the Great Plague. You see what the end game of the Great Plague is. You begin to understand the sickness, the corruption of our society and what it leads to.